Hi, my name is George Coles, and I am an avid retro video game collector.
Do a barrel roll!
I have decided to document my journeys as I grow my collection. Please join me as I share with you my finds. Welcome to Retro Game Treasure Hunting. Hi everybody and welcome to Retro Game Treasure Hunting. My name is George Coles, and on this episode we're going to do a top 10. Now the topic for this top 10? Top 10 NES or Nintendo Entertainment System games. We all had it as a kid, at least people of my age. A lot of people have played it either, younger people have either played it through the emulators or through the classic. Probably one of, if not the most iconic video game systems there is. The system that launched a generation of kids and the gamers. So let's jump right into it with my top 10 video games for the system. Now coming in at number 10, I couldn't decide between these two, so I put them together as one. And that is Tetris and Dr. Mario. Now, I went back and forth with this, which was the better of the two puzzle games. Both of them have their merits. Tetris a little more iconic, although I think Dr. Mario is a little bit better of a game. Depending on which version Tetris, because there's two on the Nintendo, the Tengen version and the Nintendo version. And they're a little bit different, each of them. Tetris has had more staying power, but I think Dr. Mario is actually the better game. But that's not saying Tetris isn't a great game as well. See, this is the argument I was having with myself. How can I put one of these two on without putting the other? They're kind of married to each other as basically the building blocks for any great puzzle game from then on. And in my opinion, both of them deserve to be on here, so they're both number 10. Now coming from that, our number 9, almost put a, well, I did put a 6 up there. I know a lot of people talk about this game and love it very much, and that's Ducktales. The NES was very hit and miss for its licensed games. There were a lot of really bad games, and for every really good one, there was 5 to 10 bad ones. For every DuckTales, there was a Jaws. For every Batman, there was a Wolverine. There was really bad ports of, basically they would make a game off of anything. They're throwing anything at the wall at this point in the history of video games. However, DuckTales, even if you took the license away and just put generic characters in, it's a really fun and interesting game. The pogo attack system is kind of a neat little thing. It's a fun side-scroller. It's a fun platformer to me. One of my favorite games, one of the games I could go back and back and back and keep going back to. Just a fun, exciting game to play. Now, coming from that, our number 8. The game that almost everybody had, and I do believe, unless you were a very early adapter or adopter of Nintendo and then you never picked up a copy, pretty much everyone had this game, and that's Super Mario. It came packed in, I think after about the 6-month period of the game system or the game life. Don't quote me, I don't know the exact numbers. But it started being packed in with itself, and then it started as itself and Duck Hunt, and then itself and Duck Hunt and World Class Track Meet. But for those people that got the game with either Rob the Robot, which I forget what game was packed in with Rob the Robot, but it wasn't Super Mario. And a lot of people kind of overlook Super Mario Brothers, the original Super Mario Brothers. They kind of consider it a lesser game, and it's, in the grand scheme of Mario games, it's not the best Mario-based game. However, when you look at the NES games, it's a fantastic NES game. It's probably the game that more people have put more time into playing. A lot of people back in the day when we would get the NES you would only have Mario and Duck Hunt for a month, 2 months, 3 months before you made enough money on your allowance or your parents decided to get you another game. So the only game you were playing was Duck Hunt or Mario, Super Mario. And as fun as Duck Hunt was, Super Mario was a superior game. And there seemed to be endless little things you could find, endless little nuances to the game that made it worth going back and back to. And to me, it really was the thing that sold the Nintendo. A lot of people, if you weren't around then, and I know a lot of people have heard through YouTube, after the video game crash of 1985, or 1983, when NES came out and then Super Mario came out, it kind of brought video games back. It was very much a risk, and this was a system seller. This was a reason to buy the NES to play Super Mario, which was, and still is, an amazing game. Even now, when I put in my NES Classic, one of the first games I played was Super Mario Brothers, so I could see how fast I could run through the game and see how much of it I remembered. So, to me, it's definitely deserving of one of the top 10. Now, our number 7, probably the best sports game on the system and probably one of the greatest sports games of all time. The one sports game that most people that are video gamers have in their collection, if they have an NES collection, and that's Mike Tyson's Punch-Out. It was so fun and so different. It's almost like a puzzle game, figuring out each boxer's little nuances and their tricks and what you have to do to hit them and how you have to wait out certain people, dodge certain attacks, block certain attacks, what the patterns were that you could hit them on so you could win. It was a game where a lot of people may have not bought RBI Baseball because they didn't like baseball, or golf because they didn't like golf, or Tecmo Bowl because they didn't like football, but most people either bought or played Mike Tyson's Punch-Out just because of the funness of the game. It was an extremely fun game, and it was so cool. It's another game that I could go in right now. If I put this game into my system, I'm going to spend 3 hours of my life playing it because I'm going to try and go through and beat Mike Tyson. And that's one of the things that makes the game so special. It's so difficult to beat Mike Tyson that it's still one of those accomplishments that 30 years later, if you tell people you beat Mike Tyson and Mike Tyson's Punch-Out, that's still impressive. That's a lot of people weren't able to do it, so it's still a notch in any gamer's belt. And I think in my lifetime, I think I've only beaten him a total of maybe 5 to 10 times, and each time you spend hours trying to break the code and trying to time it perfectly, because if you don't time it perfectly, Mike Tyson's knocking you out. There's no doubt about it. You just have to play the exact perfect match to beat him. And like I said, in 30 years, I may have beaten him 10 times. And I know a lot of people are very similar. And there's some people that have perfected it and can beat him every time they fight him. Kudos to them. I'm not one of those people. Coming off of that, going from one difficult game to another, number 6. The game that probably coined the term NES difficult. People throw that around a lot because some of the games on the system were extremely difficult to beat, and that's Contra. There's a reason why there was a Konami code, the 30 life code. And if you know the story, developers had to put that in for when they were testing the game. No one could get through the game. They had to put that little code in to give them 30 life so they could get past certain parts. And it's funny to hear that the people that developed the game had trouble beating the game. Even with the 30 life code, it's hard to beat this game. It's not an easy game. It's unforgiving. There's bullets coming at you from everywhere. Everything can kill you. It's such a demanding game, and it's such a fun game on the converse side. It's one of those games that it started a whole series of really good games. And in my opinion, one of the top-notch games in the system. I really enjoyed playing Contra, especially once you get into two-player. Two-player makes it a little bit easier, not as grueling, not as demanding. However, there are certain difficulties that come with that as well. There's only so many places you can go to hide from the bullets because you have another person that's blocking you. So you have to strategize. To me, one of the most iconic games of the system, and one of the reasons why people consider NES games so difficult. Number 5, Mega Man 3. What top 10 NES games would not be complete or would be complete without a Mega Man game? And as good as Mega Man 1 was, and as good as Mega Man 2 is, I think Mega Man 3 was a shining moment on the system. It's out of the 6 Mega Man games on the system, Mega Man 3 is my favorite. It's the most fun. The power-ups make the most sense. There is another, like I've said with a few of these already, there is a level of difficulty to it. It doesn't hold your hand through it. There's just something about playing Mega Man 3 as opposed to even Mega Man 2 and Mega Man 1. Mega Man 1 was a very fun game. It was a game that the series is built on. Mega Man 2 was great. And I went back and forth between 2 and 3, which one I wanted to put on the list. And I ultimately decided on 3 because to me, I think 3 is where they got it absolutely right. They tinkered a bit more in 4, 5, and 6. And don't get me wrong, they're very fun games as well. Every one of the Mega Man games have been fun so far. But to me, the epitome of Mega Man on NES is Mega Man 3. Now, number 4, back to the difficult games. Metroid. There's a lot of people that consider this the best game on the NES system. My brother Frank is one of them. He believes that by far this is the best game on the system. And I could hear that argument. There's so much that was innovated in this game. The open worldness of it, the difficulty, the different power-ups, the fact that you pretty much were allowed to play the game how you want to and where you wanted to. If you wanted to go left instead of right, you could go left. If you wanted to explore this way with never going this way, you could do that too. It was just a fun game, and a lot of hidden things, a lot of hidden tunnels, a lot of hidden power-ups. It was to conquer it and do everything in there. There was so much put into the game, and such a massive game for what we had in the system. It was mind-blowing how deep this game really was, and it's one of the reasons why games even now copy this and copy Metroid and copy certain games from the era because how good they were and how well planned out they were. And I think it's an absolutely fantastic game. Now, coming from that, we're going to keep down our road of difficult games on the system. Number 3, the other half of Metroidvania, Castlevania 3, Dracula's Curse. Again, another series I could have put multiple games on the top 10 list of. Castlevania 1 and 2 are both fantastic games as well. To me, 3 is the best of the 3 on the system. It's got the best graphics, the best story, the most fun to play in my opinion. I love the other 2. I'm a huge fan of the Castlevania series, and I think this is the best of the 3 that are on Nintendo. This is the one that really kept the series going. A lot of series had 1, maybe 2 games on the system, and then you never heard of them again. Games like Star Tropics, which is also a great game, but only had 2 games, and then kind of faded into obscurity. Castlevania, by the time they got to game 3, everybody loved it so much that they had to keep going with the series. So, to me, I think, and I still think it's probably one of the 3 or 4 best Castlevania games there is. I like this. If I were to go with my top 4 Castlevania games in no particular order, this, Symphony of the Night, Rondo of Blood, which is an amazing game if you play it, if you've had a chance to play it. You can play, it's hard to get the original version, but you can play it on the Dracula X collection on PSP. If you have PlayStation 4, it's in the PlayStation Store, so that you can go play Rondo of Blood. Castlevania 4 is another one I really enjoy. And those four games to me, and Bloodline for the Genesis, those 5 games really are some of the top games that I've ever played. And Castlevania 3 is right up there with all of them. I think it's really fun. It's a game you could play over and over again. Again, another degree of difficulty game. One of these games that you're going to have to fight through to win. And once you do, it's really worth it. And it gives you that satisfying feeling of you've accomplished something. Now, our number 2. I hate to say it, but probably the easiest game on the system, or on this list at least. Super Mario Bros. 3. Now, as much as Super Mario 1 helped sell the system, Super Mario 3 helped to show what the system could do, what the graphics limitations could be, how different the physics could be. They did a lot on Super Mario 3 that would carry on over into even till now. There's stuff that came from Super Mario 3 that persists in the Super Mario series. And it's just a fantastic game. It's so much fun to play. Probably, like I said, out of this list, it's the easiest one to pick up and play, in my opinion. But that doesn't make it a bad game. It's a very fun game. It's so iconic. It's such a great game for the system. And so, I couldn't think of making a list for NES without this game. And to me, really, it's one of the definitive games of the system. If you're going to start an NES collection, you have to have this game. It is a must for every NES collector. Now, before we get into our number 1, we're going to do a little thing I call the best of the rest. Basically, while compiling the list, there's a couple games that I thought of to add to the list that just didn't make it for whatever reason. Basically, my process is I compile about 13 games, and from those 13 games, I rank them how I rank them, and basically, these were the ones that were left out. First off on the best of the rest, Final Fantasy. A lot of people knowing me and seeing how much I love Final Fantasy would probably be surprised that I left Final Fantasy 1 off of this list. And to me, as great as it is, and it's a fun game, by no means is it the best Final Fantasy game. And there's a lot of things I think that left it off this list. I really honestly think the 10 games that are ahead of it are better games than that. Not to say that it's not innovative, that it didn't start a great series that I've had a serious amount of fun with. I love the Final Fantasy games. It's one of my favorite series of games. However, I just couldn't put it in the top 10 because I think all these other games are better than it for the system. And that's not saying it's a bad game. Again, remember, there's over 900 official licensed games for the Nintendo Entertainment System. And that's not including the unofficial games that came out, which most of them were garbage, but there are some good ones in there. Micro Machines is one that's not an official licensed game that's actually really good. Tengen games technically aren't licensed, and some of those games are really good. But, like I said, as innovative and as great as the game is, I just thought there was better games on the system. I spoke about this, now next up I spoke about this one a little bit before when I spoke of Castlevania 3, and that's the first Castlevania. And basically the reason why this one didn't make the list and part 3 did is the difference in the graphics. The graphics for 3 are a step up from this, and the story is a little bit better. It's almost like they figured out what they could do with the limitations of the NES, and they were able to maximize it for part 3. Not saying that 1 is a bad game. Again, it's a very good game. It's one of the most iconic games there ever was. It just failed to make this list. Now, last but not least, on the best of the rest, probably the most controversial game on this entire list. And that's Zelda 2, The Adventure of Link. You either love this game or you hate this game. It was a big departure from Zelda, or The Legend of Zelda, and a lot of people didn't like it. A lot of people didn't like the style of the game. A lot of people thought it was so different from the first one that it almost shouldn't have been a Zelda game, the whole side-scrolling aspects. And I thought it was a really fun game. I enjoyed it a lot. We came from an era where they were basically throwing anything at the wall and trying to get it to stick. Got to remember, Super Mario Bros. 1, at least in the US, and Super Mario Bros. 2 are so wildly different. And there's a lot of games that are like that. There's a lot of games where the first game in the series and the second game in the series are dramatically different on this system. So to me, I never thought of it as a bad game. I always enjoyed it. Now, before we get into our number 1, if you think I left a game off the top 10 that you believe should be up there, if you think I ranked something too high, ranked something too low, let me know what you think in the comments. Put your top 10 down here if you like. Also, hit like and share, all that other stuff that all the YouTubers tell you to do. And last but not least, my number 1 game for the Nintendo Entertainment System, The Legend of Zelda. I just touched on it when I touched on The Adventure of Link. This game, to me, is so iconic. It is so good. Everything about this game, the puzzle aspects, the dungeon aspects, the fact that you had to memorize the map, the different power-ups, this game was a lot of people's first introduction to RPG elements in video games. The action of it, everything about this game felt great. And it launched, again, another one of my favorite series, being the Zelda games, which for the most part have been all hits and hardly any misses. This game, to me, it's just a fantastic game. A lot of people love this game. It's one of the most beloved games in all of video game history. It was a game, aside from just a meaning to me personally, it has a deep meaning to me because it was a game when I was a kid, and a lot of kids from the 80s, they'll vouch for me on this. You didn't have TVs in every bedroom. You didn't have tablets and laptops that you could watch stuff on. There was 1, maybe 2 TVs in the house. And if there was 2 TVs, one was in the living room and the other was in your parents' room. So the TV in my parents' room is where the Nintendo was, because my stepfather would watch the TV in the living room. We'd go upstairs and play on the TV in my mom and stepdad's bedroom. So my mom would come in, and she enjoyed playing video games. And this was her favorite video game, too. And I had a lot of fond memories playing Zelda, just sitting there with my mother, my little brother Frank, who I mentioned earlier in this. I have a lot of fond memories. This was one of his first introductions into playing video games. Was playing Zelda with me, playing Zelda with our mother, all 3 of us playing together. And it's one of those games that really set in motion a lifetime of great memories between myself and my family. And I believe it's that way for a lot of families. It's a game that a lot of families sat down and played together and loved playing together. It had something for everybody. It had an amazing story. It had amazing gameplay. was so much fun to play. And I just love this game. I could go on and on about it. But everything I could say, anyone that's watched any videos about it have heard a million times the praises on this game. To me, the best game on the NES system, The Legend of Zelda. But, with all that being said, my name is George Coles, and this has been my opinion of the top 10 NES games.